wanted to engineer the human psyche because that is the area of greatest unknown and greatest mystery. And more importantly, it is the area in which we as a race are failing miserably. 95% of the problems that humans have in industrialized society are because you don't understand people, don't understand the wife, don't understand the boss, and don't understand the girlfriend. That's why we routinely elect idiots and criminals to run our governments, because we don't understand them. And because we don't understand them, they can pull the wool over our eyes, and they do.
Welcome to the Seven Hats Podcast. My name is Yuval Selik, and I've been on the entrepreneurial roller coaster for over 20 years. I've experienced it all throughout my journey: the grind, burnout, failure, and ultimately, success. The turning point for me was realizing that building a successful company is meaningless if you neglect the other significant areas of your life. So today, I'm inviting you to join me on an adventure through those 7 areas, what I call the 7 hats. Every week, my guests and I will drop valuable insights and pearls of wisdom, helping, motivating, and inspiring you to get your 7 hats in order and deliver real impact with meaning. So let's get going. Hey there, 7 Hatters. Today, we're diving into the fascinating world of human potential and self-discovery with Jim Marshall, a polymath, engineer, and creator of Septemics, a revolutionary system of 35 scales that unlock the mysteries of human behavior and relationships. This episode focuses on hats 1, 3, and 4, the soul, the servant, and the entrepreneur, as we explore Jim's extraordinary journey and the life-changing insights he's uncovered over decades of research. Jim's story is of boundless curiosity and a relentless pursuit of knowledge. From his upbringing in a strict yet supportive environment to his career as a human development engineer, Jim has dedicated his life to helping others achieve higher states of understanding, resilience, and connection. This episode discusses how Septemics empowers individuals and entrepreneurs to navigate life's complexities with clarity, strength, relationships, and lead intentionally. So, if you're ready to expand your mind, gain tools for personal growth, and hear how one man's quest for understanding can transform the way we see ourselves and others, sit back and let's warmly welcome Jim to the 7 Hats. Hey, Jim, welcome to the 7 Hats.
Hi, Yuval.
Jim, I'm really excited to have you here today. I've been diving into your work, and it's clear that you've devoted your life to understanding and elevating human potential in ways that I think most of us can only begin to imagine. Your creation of Septemics, which we'll get into a little bit more in depth, has truly fascinated me. I think you've unlocked insights that bridge the gap between self-discovery, relationships, and leadership. So today isn't about learning this new framework. It's about exploring how we, as individuals and entrepreneurs, can apply your discoveries to live a more fulfilled, intentional lives. So, Jim, before we dive into all of those insights and golden nuggets, the 7 Hatters, our community, love to hear the backstory. So let's start at the beginning. Even before Septemics was a seedling in your consciousness, where were you born, Jim, and how was your childhood like?
Well, I'm from New York City.
Nice.
And I have no memory whatsoever of a time when I was not intensely interested in learning everything taught in every university. And of course, that's not possible for any human because we don't live that long. But the drive has always been there, and it's still there. I have an insatiable curiosity for any legitimate subject. So, for example, I remember the exact moment when I first discovered that some children didn't like school. That was a shock to me. I loved school. I started school when I was 3, and I've been engaged in education my entire life to this date, one way or another, on one side or the other. I was standing at the chalkboard doing division with another 10-year-old boy, and he said something that I really didn't understand that kind of implied he didn't like school. And I said, wait a minute, let me get this straight. You mean you don't like school? He said, no, I don't like school. I couldn't believe it. This was like a whole new idea to me. And the light bulb went over my head. Oh, and now I'm beginning to understand these other students, why they behave the way they do. They don't like school. So I went to school for 28 years. And I was a remarkably good student, primarily because I was compliant. In other words, I did as I was told. There was never a time when I didn't do my homework. So I had mostly very good teachers because I went to private schools. And I was infinitely attentive. And that just sort of set me on the road to becoming a polymath. So that's how I started out.
Tell us about your parents. How was that relationship like? What did they do?
Well, my parents, by the time I was born, I was the fourth of the last of the four children.
Mm-hmm.
By then, my father was a rich man. My mother was a trophy wife. She looked like a movie star. So my father had all of these custom-made suits they had about 100 bow ties to go with it, and a Homburg and a briefcase,
Mm-hmm.
He was a very shrewd businessman. So I was the only son in the family, which in those days made a big difference because there was men's work and there was women's work.
Mm-hmm.
So my three sisters divided up the women's work, and I did all the men's work. So I grew up in a very strict environment, went to very strict schools, and none of that bothered me at all. I just accepted it as that's the way things were.
Was your insatiable appetite for knowledge, did that come from your father, you think?
I don't think it came from either one of them.
You were just born with it. Soul
Yeah, I was
came in
born
with
with
that. So what did your father do? Was he an entrepreneur, his own business, or did he work for a
He was a
corporation?
businessman. I mean, he did a few different things, but by the time I was around, especially by the time I understood money, he had all kinds of investments. And I was the only son, and I was highly intelligent and very well behaved. So he trusted me. So by the time I was a teenager, he was letting me handle money.
Nice.
He would say, look, I'm going to go on vacation for 2 weeks. Mrs. Smith is going to come here every Tuesday and give you an envelope, and you put it in the drawer. And I said, okay, and I did. So I was right at his elbow, and I learned a lot from him.
And what did he want to see you do? Like, what was did he have a desire or a goal or an expectation of you?
Well, let me put it this way. As an adult, after I left home and I would come back to visit, my father would always say to me, are you making money? That's what he was interested in, And I say, yes. And sometimes he'd say, well, tell me about it. Sometimes I would tell him how much I made, and he would be just thrilled to hear that I was making money. That was not a motivation for me. I was never money motivated. I really spent my life around clergy, artists, and intellectuals, because those are the things that attracted me.
In high school, I guess, in college, you were an academic, so you wanted to continue on. Where did that lead to? What was your first out-of-school experience?
Well, I think the story really starts at age 16 when I was accepted into engineering school.
Mm-hmm.
And of course, I thought at that moment that I was going to be engineering physical things such as airfoils and motors and electrons. But by the time I had my bachelor's degree, it was clear to me that I wanted to engineer the human psyche, because that is the area of greatest unknown and greatest mystery. And more importantly, it is the area in which we as a race are failing miserably. 95% of the problems that humans have in industrialized society are because you don't understand people, don't understand the wife, don't understand the boss, don't understand the cousin, don't understand the girlfriend. That's why we routinely elect idiots and criminals to run our governments, because we don't understand them. And because we don't understand them, they can pull the wool over our eyes, and they do.
I think that hits home. I think for a lot of listeners, including myself, relationships are hard. And especially when there's miscommunication, undercommunication, lack of insight into the folks that you're working with, dealing with, family or friends, loved ones. I agree. I think you hit it.
Right.
You hit the nail on the head with that.
Yes.
Absolutely.
And let me just respond to one thing you said. Relationships are hard. For everybody I know, that's true, but it's not true for me. And I'll tell you why. I had a long career as a human development engineer.
Mm-hmm.
I understand humans the way an aeronautical engineer understands airplanes, the way an automotive engineer understands automobiles, the way a chemical engineer understands chemicals. It's a complete depth of understanding that I have extruded over the decades.
So let's then dive in to your studies, because I think that's probably what you spent all your life thinking about and doing at this point with Septemics. So how does Septemics help individuals clarify their purpose and values? Give us the beginning stages of it and how us humans, mere mortals, can utilize it to understand themselves and relationships.
Okay, so there's several different questions there. I think I should sort of finish answering the last question you gave me, because when I tell you where it came from, it really explains a lot.
Please.
So after I graduated, I had a long career as a human development engineer, using engineering principles, tactics, strategies, devices, theories, strategies, etc., to work one-on-one with individuals of every type to help them achieve higher states of knowledge, responsibility, ethics, insight, and so forth, depending on what the client wanted. Now, all of my clients improved as a result of our interaction, and they improved in the ways they wanted to improve. But I started to notice, incidentally, that I could predict the outcome of the session. I never told this to anyone, but I made notes. And as the decades rolled by, I just kept observing and writing it down, observing and writing it down. Well, by 1995, I had about 32 scales of varying lengths, between 3 and 7, that I had simply observed. Now, what I came to realize little by little is that the client would be at a specific level on a specific scale that I had previously observed, and as a result of our interaction, he would move up to the next level on that scale. Now, this happened thousands and thousands of times. Sometimes it would happen 10 times in the same session, depending on how long the session was. Every time that happened, it verified my hypothesis, because the clients knew nothing about what I was recording, what I was observing, what I was thinking. I told my clients very little, even if they asked me, like, you think I should marry this girl? I would never say yes or no. Never. Okay? I would say, what do you think? So by 1995, I had about 32 scales that I knew were correct from direct observation. Because you have to realize, after I observed this in session, I would then go out into the rest of the world and see the very same phenomena right in front of my eyes, observing people who didn't even know me. And this just made me more certain. Now, needless to say, all of this made me better at what I did. I just got better and better at it. So by 1995, I had these 32 scales that I knew were correct from direct empirical observation and long experience. So I was pondering one day a difficult client, and I realized that this client was at a specific level on a specific scale that I had not noticed. In other words, I had the 6th level scale that I had been working with for decades that I knew was correct. But then I said, there's a 7th level. And as soon as I saw the level, I knew immediately where to insert it in the scale. That was not a question. And when I inserted that 7th level into the 6th level scale, it manifested mathematically. Now, let me tell you what I mean by that. The whole point of math is you start with a formula or an equation and you coax data out of it. That's how Einstein found E equals mc squared. Everybody in the math and physics community knows how he did it. It's no secret. So when you have data appear like that, that is a mathematical phenomenon. So having taken 26 semesters of math and having loved every minute of it, this is a very real thing to me. I see math in the real world when it manifests. To me, it's not just something you do on paper with a pencil. It's a real thing that's there in the manifestations that you observe. If you don't understand it, you can't see it. But that's true for everything.
Absolutely.
So when I saw this 6-level scale go to 7 levels, manifest mathematically, it went from being a line, which is what a scale is, to a plane, which is a whole body of data. So this whole thing fit together like a Chinese puzzle in a mathematical way. So there were all these components of it that just appeared to me. And when I saw this, I said, whoa, I found something here. Whatever this is, it has to be a natural law, because anything that has mathematics embedded in it is natural law. Like, for example, the Fibonacci sequence, the Pythagorean theorem. So when I saw that, I said, I wonder how many of these other scales that I have are actually 7-level scales that had not been developed all the way, because I wasn't developing anything. I was just helping my clients and making notes. So knowing what I was looking for, I then observed all these other scales, these 31 other scales, and in a short period of time, each of them developed into a 7-level scale. And when it did, it manifested mathematically. So now I have 32 7-level scales, all based on direct empirical observation, that all had mathematics embedded in them. So I thought, this looks like a new subject to me, because having gone to school for 28 years, I never saw anything like this. So then I thought, I could go from helping people by the hundreds, which is what I had been doing throughout my life as human development engineer, to helping them by the millions if I put this in a book and get it out so people can have it. So I'm going to have to write a book. So the first draft was completed in December of 95. And I sent it out in a transcript form to colleagues of mine, all of whom had graduate degrees in a variety of subjects. And they all responded very positively. They had different responses, but distinctly positive responses. And that confirmed my suspicion, which is that I had found something here, a new subject that could really be of use to people. And I then spent the next 25 years of my life working on this book. Because you have to realize, first I had to discover the phenomena, and I pretty much told you how that happened, although I did find 3 more skills as I was writing the book. Then I had to take this data and I had to use it to craft a workable philosophic system. So finding the phenomena was scientific. Crafting this system was engineering. Because you have to understand, the product of a scientist is a theory. If he's totally successful, the theory of evolution, the theory of relativity, whatever it is. But the product of an engineer is a thing that works.
Yes.
And it has to work all the time for everyone. As an engineer, you can't say, oops, right? Oh, the plane fell out of the sky, oops. You
My
can't
co-founder is an engineer, so I know.
Okay. Okay. So this had to work all the time for every person. So that took 20 years to develop this into a workable philosophic science. Now, what was happening during that 20 years is I'd get some feedback. I would rewrite the book. I would release it again. I would get feedback. I would rewrite the book. And there were about half a dozen rewrites. And each time it got clearer and clearer and clearer. Because my intent from day one was to help the average person. So This is a burden that most people in science and engineering don't have. For example, when Einstein released his theories of relativity, he was writing for the math and physics community. He made no attempt to explain this to the average person. So the most time-consuming aspect of this was expressing this in a way that would make sense to the average reader of English. And I know I succeeded at that because some version of this book has existed now for 29 years. And I've been seeing people respond to it. They get it. Put this in front of somebody's face, assuming he can read English reasonably well. Doesn't work on a 5-year-old, right? Or a person who only speaks Chinese, right? Somebody can read English reasonably well, and he looks at it and he says, oh, yeah, this makes sense. And he will start having insights as a result of that. So that's where this came from. So let me tell you in a general way, without going into specifics or analogies, how this is helpful to your viewers. First of all, these 35 scales, each of them gives the person an infallible way to determine the salutariness or beneficialness of any group, individual, or activity. If it moves persons up the scales, it's beneficial or positive. If it moves them down, it's detrimental or negative. So I'm giving people a yardstick by which to measure human affairs, which is an entirely new concept. Secondly, anytime you correctly locate a person, whether it's yourself or another, on any scale, you have an insight. In other words, it is inherently enlightening. So a guy is looking at some scale, right? It could be the first time he ever saw it. So he's reading, let's say it gets down to level 5. And he says, wait a minute, this is my mother-in-law. This is exactly how she acts. This happens all the time with this book. I don't know this guy's mother-in-law. I probably don't even know the guy. There are people all over the world with this book. I'm never going to meet them. But they look at this and they say, oh, this is my boss. This is what he does. See, now they have a handle on this. But you have to realize there were 35 scales. So you can analyze anyone you want across 35 axes. And by the time you finish doing that, you will understand that person better than he understands himself. Because every time you correctly spot the person, you have an insight. So you look at a person, oh, now I understand why he's so good at this. Yeah, see? Now, every time you have that insight, you're a little bit smarter. And you bring that smartness with you to the next scale or the next analysis. So when you go to scale 2 on this person and you spot it, now I can see what this guy's doing. He's at level 5 on the scale of control. No wonder he does this and this and this and this. This explains it. See, you're a little smarter. So this creates a virtuous cycle where the more you use this, the smarter you get. And the smarter you get, the more you want to use it.
So just as a brief overview, I'm sure a lot of folks are going to be going out to buy the book, but what is a scale? Like, give me a couple of examples of what a scale is, and then a couple of examples of a level so they can get a context behind.
Okay. First of all, let me define Septemics with you precisely and concisely so you know exactly what it is. Septemics is a philosophical science based on the fact that many phenomena related to humans occur in a sequence of 7 levels. Literally, the word septemics means of or pertaining to 7. Septemics comprises a collection of scales or hierarchies or sequences, each of which is unique and between them, they span the spectrum of human experience. So let me tell you the names of the 35 scales.
Mm-hmm.
And then you know exactly what subject matter is addressed in the book.
Mm-hmm.
24 of these scales I call individual scales, meaning they apply primarily to an individual, and 11 apply primarily to groups. I call them group scales. So these are the individual scales: the scale of basic purposes, the scale of personal influence, the scale of choice, the scale of permeation, the scale of thought, the scale of identity, the scale of evaluation, the scale of motivation, the scale of control, the scale of stopping, the scale of scholarship, the scale of literacy, the scale of human ability, the scale of memory, the scale of spiritual identity, the scale of mental deletion, the scale of aberration, the scale of physical fitness, the scale of justification, the scale of belief, the scale of equanimity, the scale of attack, the scale of conflict, and the scale of reaction. And these are the group scales: the scale of relationships, the scale of life spheres, the scale of government, the scale of civilization, the scale of survival, the scale of management, the scale of exchange, the scale of communication, the scale of allegiance, the scale of sexuality, and the scale of politics. Any one of these scales by itself could dramatically improve the life of the reader. And I'll give you an example. I mentioned the scale of motivation. One of the most important things to know about a person is his motivation. Why is this person doing this thing? So that's how the police solve crimes. They look for a motive, right? They say, well, this guy has no motive to kill this person, so we're not going to bother with him. But wait, there's an insurance policy for $500,000, and the wife is the beneficiary. She becomes a suspect. Maybe she didn't do it, but that's how they proceed, right? So you could take this scale and you could ask yourself, what is my wife's motivation toward me? What is my son's motivation toward me? What is my grandfather's motivation toward me? What is my partner's motivation toward me? Et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And you could do this with everyone you know and everyone you've ever known. So you could wind up using this one scale in this particular application 300, 400, 500 different times. Then you could take the same scale and reverse the vector and ask, what is my motivation toward my pastor? What is my motivation toward my girlfriend? What is my motivation toward my brother? Et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And you could use it on that flow or reverse flow another 300 or 400 or 500 times. Now, by the time you finish this exercise, you will know the motivation inflowing and outflowing for everybody you ever knew. And your mind will be greatly clarified, because when you know somebody's motivation, you can predict what they're going to do. You know what to expect. So that's one scale. There are 35 scales, you see. Now, several people have said to me, what book is your book like? Having gone to school for 28 years, I have to say, I don't think there's ever been a book like this, at least on Earth. But I can tell you this. Every one of these 35 scales is expressed in what you could call a table or a spreadsheet that's in many ways comparable to the periodic table of elements. You know, you look at the periodic table. Try to remember back when you first looked at it, when you were maybe 12, 11, 13, you first saw this thing. Oh, this makes sense. Hydrogen's here, helium's here, lithium comes third, and it goes down. Everything, this cross-reference horizontally, tells us that we have these periods, all the metals behave a certain way, and the ones that aren't metals don't behave that way. And then we have the noble gases, they all behave a certain way. See, this is very illuminating to the subject of chemistry. Now, each of these 35 tables that are in the book is a periodic table for the 35 scales that I just read off to you. So, for example, the scale of basic purposes. There is a periodic table for the basic purposes. Every human being has one of 7 basic purposes. The fact that it's only 7 is extremely helpful because you're not choosing from a huge menu. You go to In-N-Out Burger. They have about 6 things. You get a burger, you get a cheeseburger, you can get a chocolate shake, a strawberry shake. That's about it, French fries, that's about it. So it's not hard to decide. Sometimes you go to a Chinese restaurant, it's like 300 things. How do I decide this? So this is very user-friendly. So if I were to go out here on the street and stop some complete stranger, walk up to him and say, "What's your wife's motivation toward you?" He would look at me like I was from Mars. And he would probably think something like, "How could I possibly know that? There are thousands and thousands of motivations." And I would say to him, "No, there are only 7 basic motivations, and all the others are merely subsets of these." And if I showed him the scale, he would look at it, and he would see that it is logic itself, that you can see how logical this is. And he would say, "Oh, yeah." And he would spot his wife's motivation.
Are the 7 levels the same for every scale?
Well, they're all 1 through 7, but no, as I said, each scale is unique. You cannot infer anything about scale A from studying scale B.
So you have to understand the 35 scales, and each scale has 7 levels that you need to understand within that scale's,
Right. You use
existence.
that scale, it's got 7 levels, which makes it very easy. So, for example, let's say a scale of thought. There are 7 levels of human thought. This is like a new concept to most people. This is why people behave the way they do with concepts. So, for example, you have the fictional characters Sherlock Holmes and Mr. Spock. They are caricatures of someone who is at level 3, which is analytical thought. So that's the type of person, he could look at something and he will analyze it. If someone is not at that level, he's not going to be able to function like that. And that's why I read every Sherlock Holmes story ever written and seen all the movies and all the TV shows. That is why he was always able to solve the crimes and the police weren't. He went out of his way to not insult the police, and he would just solve it for them and say, "This guy's the murderer, and here's why." Because he can analyze it. And that's what this material gives to you. It gives you a way to analyze humans and consequently predict what they're going to do and consequently manage them because you can predict them. So the subtitle of the book is Analysis, Prediction, and Management of Human Affairs.
Is it more impactful for self-discovery or other relationships?
Either way.
Just as impactful?
Just either way. As far as using it on yourself, it is absolutely a life-changing experience. When you find your basic purpose, that's the first scale in the book. There are only 7 basic purposes. When you find that, you have an epiphany. So, now I understand this and this and this and this. And that's why this girl didn't like me. And that's why this girl did like that, blah, blah, blah. See, you know where you know your basic purpose. And what you do is you throw out the other 7. They're not for you.
So you can only have 1 out of the 7 at one point.
That's right.
But you can grow into a higher or lower realm over time?
Generally, yes. When you see somebody crash, what you're seeing is he is falling down many scales, not just 1, many. So you have a guy, right? And he makes $200,000 a year. He lives in a 12-room house. He's got a beautiful wife and a little girl, right? Mm-hmm. Well, the wife and the little girl die in an automobile accident. The guy is crushed, right? He starts drinking, taking drugs. Well, because of that, he loses his job. Because he loses his job, he loses his house. He winds up a homeless person on the street, stealing, picking from garbage pails, right? Now, 10 years earlier, this guy was like a successful person. He crashed. He went down many scales, not just 1. This person deteriorated down these many scales.
Are they interrelated in some way? So if you happen to fall or rise with 1, it automatically falls or rises with another one?
Well, let me put it to you this way. There are 12 septemic axioms. Every science has axioms. You can see them on the website if you want. They're there. One of the axioms is, being high, being at or near the top of any scale is both a cause and an effect of being at or near the top of any other scale. So, in other words, when you move up on one scale, it tends to bring you up on the others, but not linearly. It's uneven. And the opposite is also true. Being at or near the bottom of any scale is both a cause and an effect of being at or near the bottom of every other scale. So there are generally upscale persons, and there are generally downscale persons. So let's say you see some guy, right? He's an alcoholic, a homeless person, a violent person, poorly educated, living on the street, right? That person is probably at or near the bottom of all of the scales. That's why he's in that state. And the opposite is true. Let's say you see a guy, he's brilliant, he's a billionaire, he has a supermodel wife, he speaks very well, he's well-read, he knows his job. He's going to be at or near the top of many of these scales. So the truth is about most of us, and I mean more, maybe 95% of us, is that we are high in some scales and low in other scales. Fewer than 1% of the population is at or near the top of all the scales. That would be somebody like Jesus or Gandhi. A larger number, maybe 4%, is at or near the bottom of all the scales. That would be some ignorant, dumb, professional criminal who uses drugs. So the way to use this is very simple. Let's say you have a buddy, your friend Fred. Every time you see Fred, he says, Yuval, I don't know what I'm going to do about my girlfriend. She's driving me nuts. You say, tell me about it. He says, well, she's drinking. She doesn't clean the house. She yells at me. I think she's fooling around with some guy. You know, she's doesn't listen to me. So after 6 months of this, you get tired of hearing this. You say, Fred, come here, let me show you something. And you open up the book to the scale of relationships. Presumably this guy can read English reasonably well, right? So he looks at it, and he's probably going to say something like, you mean there's a scale of relationships? And you say, yes, this relationship that you have been complaining to me about for 6 months, where is it on this scale? Guaranteed he's going to want to know that because he's having trouble and you're opening a door for him. So he looks at it, right? First blush. And what's going to happen is, in a matter of seconds, he will find a bracket. He will say something to you like, well, I can see right away, it's definitely not 1, 2, or 3, because that's the top of the scale, and we're having a lot of trouble. So it's got to be like 4, 5, 6, or 7. You say, okay, go ahead and read the text, and then you can nail it exactly. Guaranteed he's going to want to do that. It's right there. It's not costing him anything, right? So he reads it. You can help him as a tutor. And he comes back, and you say to him, okay, now, take a look at it. Which one is it? And he's then going to say, well, now that I read this, I can see this relationship is at level 5. That's not so good. That's near the bottom. No wonder we're having all kinds of trouble. And he will give you specific things. He will say, that explains why when I did this, she did that. And explains why she does this and this and this. See, he's having realizations. That tells you he got it right. Now, you could help him move up from 5 to 4. But you could say to him, you know, we can move this relationship up to level 4 and you'll have a better relationship. You say, we can? You say, yeah, it tells you in the book how to do that. Well, let's do it. Well, wait a minute now. Before we do that, let me show you something else. And you open it up to the scale of sexuality. Well, that's part of this deal, isn't it? So you say to him, look at this. He looks at it. He says, you mean there's a scale of sexuality? You say, yeah. You don't have to tell me if you don't want. But for your own illumination, where are you on this scale? Guaranteed he's going to want to know that because you're opening a door. So he's going to look at it in a matter of seconds. He's going to find a bracket. He's going to say something like, well, I can see right away that 6 and 7 have nothing to do with us. Okay, fine. Go ahead and read it, and then you can get it exactly. See, he's got it down to 5. So he reads it. He comes back. Well, now that I read it, I could see I'm at level 4. Okay, it's in the middle, not too bad. But he might also say, and Gertrude, who's driving me nuts, she's a level 5. No wonder we can't get along. See, he's already having epiphanies about this. Now, this can go a couple ways, right? He might say, Yuval, lend me your book. I want to borrow this and give it to Gertrude and help her with this. Gertrude might not want to do that. She might say, get the hell out of here. Don't bother me. I don't care about your book. But she might not. She might say, oh, really? Tell me about this, right? But we don't know where it's going to go from there. That's not up to us. That's up to them. So that's how this works in a general way. It's very user-friendly. And the reason it works so well is it's precise and accurate in the same way that the formula for a circle is precise and accurate, that the Pythagorean theorem is precise and accurate.
How often do you find individuals who won't admit or won't identify the reality in their lives and choose different levels based on hope perception that is inaccurate?
You mean select the wrong level?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Well, first of all, let me explain this. This book is for anyone who can read English reasonably well and wants to improve himself or others. Now, many people make the mistake of thinking that includes everybody, and I'm sorry it doesn't. There are many people who have no interest in improving themselves or others. And a lot of those people aren't even able to read this book. You know, if you study professional criminals, you'll find most of them are very poorly educated, barely literate, dropped out of school, et cetera, et cetera. So they wouldn't even be able to read this book. But there's all kinds of categories of people who have no motivation to use this book. Psychopaths, sociopaths, narcissists, professional criminals, corrupt politicians, serial murderers, all kinds of war criminals, you know. These people, the reason they are in those categories is that they are at or near the bottom of many of these scales. And anytime a person is at or near the bottom of a scale, he is going to have trouble with it, because this goes to another axiom, which is that when a person is at or near the top of any scale, it's because he's insightful in that area, meaning these 35 areas. When a person is at or near the bottom of any scale, it's because he lacks insight in that area. So if a person is, let's say, at level 6, and you have him look at that scale, he's going to have a lot of trouble. He's going to have a lot of trouble understanding that scale. He's probably going to reject it. He's probably going to say, this doesn't make any sense. Let me give you a historical example, okay, for how this works. Anybody who's been paying attention for the last 35 years knows that Bill Clinton is a smart man. Right? He was a Rhodes Scholar. Very smart man. You listen to him speak, he thinks. He gives you an insightful answer. He analyzes it, okay? He knows what he's talking about. And that showed up in his presidency because he adjusted. He was able to bring in, smart enough to bring in Dick Morris to advise him. He was smart enough to listen to Dick Morris, take his advice. Then he got, as a result of which he got reelected. He left with a high approval rating, okay, even though he was impeached. He was the last president ever to sign a balanced budget. Now you could say, well, the Republicans forced him into it, and there's some truth to that. But he was smart enough to give the people what they wanted. See, that takes some smarts.
Mm-hmm.
So, on the scale of human ability, he's high on that scale. I'm not giving any levels. I'm just saying he's high on that scale. But if I had a daughter or a sister, I would say to them, don't go out with Bill Clinton, because it is common knowledge that he's a serial abuser of women. All kinds of women sued him because of how he treated them. There were women who went on video and stated with specificity how he raped them. Okay? And his dopiness in this area is shown by the fact that how he mishandled this. So he got sued. He went on the stand and he perjured himself.
Mm-hmm.
And then he suborned perjury to get other people to perjure themselves. And those are the two things that went to the Senate for which he was impeached. Now, no president has ever been removed from office as a result of an impeachment because the Senate has always said, we're not going to do this. Okay? But it certainly shows you that he mishandled it.
Yeah.
If he was shrewd in this, he would have said, look, honey, here's $250,000, okay? Take a hike. See? That would have handled it. Then he wouldn't have had to go on the stand. That's the way you handle that. So clearly, there's one scale there, specific scale was very high. Scale of sexuality, he's obviously very low. This is no secret. Everybody knows this. I'm just putting it in a septemic context. I'm not saying I dislike the guy. I have a lot of respect for him. If you said, Jim, Bill Clinton's coming over, you want to come? I'd be there in a New York minute to shake his hand and talk to him. But still, he's not too swift on this area, He's kind of dopey. Now, JFK, he was a philanderer, but he was a lot smarter about it.
Yep.
See? So Jackie knew what he was doing and he had her handled and he was able to keep everybody happy, and do what he wanted. And he was so beloved that he was able to pull this off. Because we didn't even know until many years later what had been going on with Marilyn Monroe and everybody else, right? So clearly, JFK, he was high in the scale of human ability, but he was also high in the scale of sexuality. So he had some insight what to do with this, how to handle it. So this is what you see in people. So you have a friend who's having trouble in some area. You know what that tells you? He's not insightful in that area. Because if he was insightful, he'd go, fixed. So this goes on with me all the time. People come to me with problems, like friends, like in my youth, a lot of women were after me. And the friends would sort of notice this and they'd say, Jim, can you advise me about what I should do with my girlfriend? And I would tell them, and I really did not understand why they couldn't figure this out. I mean, obviously I was insightful in that area because I kind of knew how to do it. And they weren't. Well, this is before I discovered Septemics. Now I know exactly what it was. So this is why hundreds and hundreds of people came to me as human development engineer. And they all had different problems. One guy's a drinking problem. Another guy has an employment problem. Another guy has a wife problem. Whatever it was, they told me about it, and I used my techniques and I got him to a realization, which was essentially getting him to move up these scales. So I was using this material before I even had the idea of Septemics. Septemics came into my mind when I saw that 6th level scale go to a 7th level and manifest mathematically. And I said, whoa, natural law. And coming from a hard science background, that meant something to me. And so I pursued it.
Interesting on the number 7. Let me tap into your mathematical mind. So the number 7 obviously resonates with me, of the 7 hats. And I'm curious as to, and I don't know if you know this, but you see 7 everywhere. I mean, in spirituality, in mathematics, in science, everywhere.
Mm-hmm.
What makes the number 7 so significant, do you think, across cultures, disciplines, and what are your thoughts on how it just relates so perfectly with so many different subjects?
There's a section in the book. In the largest section of the book is called Introduction to Septemics, where I explain, I don't go into the scales, I go into what it is and how it works. And there's a section called Why 7. Then I explain in detail why 7. It's a mathematical explanation. You can go on my website and read that. It's on the website.
Love it. I can't wait. So our audience are entrepreneurs, business leaders. Resilience is a common word that gets thrown around when you're in this field.
Mm-hmm.
I'm curious to know, what lessons have you learned specifically, personally, about resilience through your studies and practices, and also the creation of your book and Septemics in general?
Okay, well, as regards Septemics absolutely enhances resilience because a person's resilience is undercut by having losses, right? So the guy falls in love with some girl, she dumps him, he gets hurt, he starts drinking, he feels sad for himself. Well, if he had been smart enough to see where she was on these various scales, he would probably have said, I'm not going to go there. And I'll give you an example. I'm a single guy. About 3 months ago, I met this beautiful blonde. She looked like a movie star. So we were both very interested in one another. And so we went through the usual preliminaries. Where do you live? What's your schedule like? What do you like to do in your spare time? The usual early in the relationship stuff.
Mm-hmm.
And there, we had, I don't know, maybe 8 different conversations like that, right? And as this was happening, I noticed, she's low on this scale. And another time, oh, she's low on this other scale. And another time, oh, she's low on this other scale. After a few of these, I said, what am I, crazy? Whoa. I dismissed her. I just said to her, pass. No thanks. She was shocked. I was probably the first guy in her life who did that to her because she was so gorgeous and glamorous and attractive. Most of the guys would have just jumped in and had a train wreck.
Do you think that because you're so high on, I'm sure, many scales, because you've practiced this, right? You've been writing this for decades, so you've obviously honed in and tried to better yourself, because obviously you wouldn't even write a book if you didn't care about constant, never-ending improvement. Do you find yourself having a hard time with relationships because it's hard to find folks that are high on the scales in relations to your abilities?
I have no trouble with that. It's the other people who don't have this data who have the trouble. Like your hypothetical friend, Fred, whose girlfriend, Gertrude, is driving him nuts. That doesn't happen to me. When I was a young man, this material didn't exist. I hadn't discovered it yet. So I made the same stupid mistakes that everybody else makes, right? And I got involved with people I never should have been involved with because I didn't know what I was looking at. Now, for me, that does not happen, cannot happen, will not happen. So it happens positive and negative. So, for example, I'll meet somebody and I'll say, oh, this person is high on this scale. This person is high on this scale. This person is high. This is an upscale person. I want this person in my life. And so I will go out of my way to keep that person in my life. And this is played out over long periods of time where I have very good relationships with these upscale people. The opposite is also true. I'll bump into someone and say, whoa, this guy's at level 6 on the scale. Bad sign, see? And when I see that, I'll start looking at other things. Well, where is he on the scale? Oh, not so good. I'm done. Have a nice day. Goodbye. We're done. See?
What do you do when there's so some folks you can say I'm done, but what about others like family or those relations,
right,
like a boss, though you can't say you're done?
That's right. Sometimes you have to say you're done. Okay? More than 50% of the marriages in the United States end in divorce because one or both of them realize this is a train wreck. I got to get out of this, right? And very often, probably most of the time, one or either of them does much better after that, okay? So a guy, let's say a woman marries a guy, he turns out to be violent, turns out to be a drunk, turns out to be somebody who can't keep a job. She says, I'm out of here. We're done, okay? And now she's sort of forewarned about these things. So that now when she's going out, she says, do you drink a lot? See? You ever lose your temper? See? So she can find somebody now because she's sort of weeding them out. But let me give you an example. In my life, I have 3 sisters. 2 of them are conservatives and 1 is a liberal. I get along great with all 3 of them. I simply don't go there. My father very wisely taught me in my youth, do not discuss religion or politics. I don't. Okay? So it's not an issue. I don't care what they say. So, I have one sister, she might say, Trump, get away. Okay. See, I'm not even going to mention Trump to her. And then the other people, if you say, Kamala, oh no, Kamala, not going to bring it up. So what I'm saying is, when you know that a person has this issue, you can tiptoe around it, but it's very specific. I'll give you an example. I have a friend, wonderful guy, smart, successful, family man, okay, affluent. I would describe him as political extremist. Now, if you look at the scale of politics, I say the extremists are the people who cause all the trouble. I mean, like these Islamic terrorists, they're political extremists, right? They murder people. Mm-hmm. They murder innocent people. Political extremists are people who break the law to achieve political ends. They commit blackmail, bribery, all kinds of things, right? So when I'm with this person, I know this. So I just tiptoe around it. Doesn't matter what he says. Not going to argue with him. We don't discuss that. We discuss the other 500 things we agree about. We could talk about baseball. We could talk about gardening. We could talk about fishing, whatever. It's great, you see? But he's got this one. I just tiptoe around it because I know. Now, let me give you an analogy to really make this easier to understand. If you invited me to your garden, I don't even know if you have a garden, but if you do, you might say, Jim, come and look at my garden. I say, okay, I like gardens, all right? I've been gardening since I was a boy. So you invite me over. I say, oh, Yuval has hydrangeas, roses, tulips, irises, peonies, chrysanthemums. See, et cetera, et cetera. Now, the reason I can analyze it that way is I know a lot about flowers. I have a lifetime of experience with flowers. So if you were to bring, let's say, some 5-year-old kid into that garden, he would see and smell exactly what I saw and smelled. But all he can say is, these are pretty and they smell nice. That's all he knows. Now, most adults are like that kid regarding people.
Regarding most things.
They don't know what they're looking at. They don't know that this guy's a hydrangea and this guy's a peony and this guy's a chrysanthemum. They don't know that. They have no way to analyze it. And this book gives you a way across 35 axes to analyze the person. Because I have to tell you, every human being is at some level on every scale. The data is just sitting there waiting for you to get it. It's like a blood pressure. Everybody has a blood pressure. We don't know what it is. That's why you go to the doctor. One of the first things they do is they take your blood pressure. Okay, it's blah, blah, blah. Oh, went up 5 points. Okay. As soon as you talk to a person, you know he has a blood pressure, but you don't know what it is. So if the person doesn't have a blood pressure, it's not a person, it's a corpse. It's a thing. So that is what this is like. You know it's there. It's not that hard to ascertain. So you look at the person and you don't tell him what level he's at. You just show him the material. So let me give you an example. Most people have children, and most children have trouble in school. So dad sees that Junior is having trouble in school. He's got this book. He says, Junior, come here, let me show you this. And he opens it up to the scale of scholarship. Well, Junior's in junior high. He can read the book. He knows what scholarship means. And he knows he's not a good student, right? He sees his report card. It's got C's and D's. So dad says, look at this. And Junior's going to say, you mean there's a scale of scholarship? And dad says, yeah. Where are you on this scale? Guaranteed Junior's going to want to know that because he's having trouble. So Junior, in 30 seconds, 35 seconds, he's going to find a bracket. He's going to say, I definitely can see that 1, 2, and 3 don't relate to me because that's the top of the scale and I'm not good at this. So the dad says, okay, read the text and he can get it exactly. So then he reads it, he knows what it's about, and at some level, oh yeah, this describes me, this is it, right? He realizes, okay, I'm a level 5. That's not so good. That explains why, blah, 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 blah. And dad says to him, we can move you from 5 up to 4. And it tells you in the book how to do that. So now dad, working with Junior, can follow the instructions in the book. Because I tell you with specificity how to make a better scholar. There's no mystery about this with me. It's just like baking a cake, You need a cup of milk, quarter teaspoon of salt, and so forth. It's a recipe. So dad helps the kid. The kid starts being better in school. 6 months later, his report card comes out. Instead of getting C's and D's, he's getting B's and C's. And this was done without hiring a tutor, without sending the kid to remedial classes, without invalidating the kid, without making the kid feel stupid or anything like that. It's all very positive. And so now the dad didn't have to spend any money. He just used the book. So now the kid at some point is going to say, Dad, what was that book you showed me? And he gives him the book. Here, look at it. And he's going to open it up and he's going to say, whoa, I never thought about that. This is, yeah.
Myers-Briggs and other personality and tests, they have a set of questions that guide the user or the reader through identifying their personality. Do you have such a thing?
No.
Where so somebody just must read the book, analyze the book, understand the book, rather than kind of going through the wizard approach?
Right. Because remember I said, every time you correctly spot a level, you have an insight or a realization or an epiphany, whatever you want to call it. So all you have to do is show this to the person. Because it's natural law, it's going to make sense to him. Mm-hmm. It's like, how hard is it to teach somebody the Pythagorean theorem? Kids in the 7th grade, you show it to him. See? He says, oh, I get this. This side is 3, this side is 4. That means this hypotenuse has got to be 5. See? He gets it right away. He's got it. So you have to realize this is not hard to do because it's natural law. It's just like, I'm just giving you the data. Say, here, use this data. You don't tell somebody, because when you tell somebody his level, you're taking away the epiphany from him. People don't like to be evaluated. The wife says to the husband, you know what's wrong with you? You're not ambitious enough. You need to get a better job. You need to get a weekend. That's not helping him. Just give him the damn book. Let him read it, and he'll figure out himself. Oh, yeah, I'm kind of low on this scale. And he moves himself up. So let me tell you something. People tell you their levels. It comes right out of their mouths. So this is not hard to figure out.
Love it. I have a couple more questions. First one, if everyone, this is hypothetical, but I'd like to kind of hear what you think. If everyone started using Septemics in the entire world, what kind of world do you envision creating?
It would be a world that would be much more rational than it is now. You wouldn't have people clinging to belief as much. Belief is only necessary when knowledge is absent. This is a book of knowledge of human phenomena. So most people operate on beliefs. In other words, there's no knowledge there. It's just a belief. I don't believe that the acceleration of gravity into the surface of the earth is 10 meters per second. I know it. You don't have to take my word for it. Here's a golf ball and a stopwatch. Go out and calculate it yourself. Okay? It's been calculated millions of times. Okay? That's not belief. That's knowledge. So when you have knowledge, you don't need belief. Sometimes you ask a person a question and he hesitates and says, well, I believe, blah, 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 blah. He doesn't know. If he knows, he just tells you, blip, there it is.
Yeah.
You say to somebody, what is the formula for a circle? Pi r squared. Okay, that's the area of a circle, pi r squared. Belief has nothing to do with it. He knows. So when you talk to somebody about something he knows, it's not belief. I once had a friend take me to a polo match. I have no interest in polo. But if a girlfriend says to me, let's do this, I say, okay. So we went, right? So there's all these horses, right? Lots of horses. And she sees some said, oh, that's a good horse. I have no idea what the hell she's looking at. What do I know about horses? I know how to ride one. But to me, they all look the same. They all just look like horses to me. But she was an equestrian. She knew all about horses. So she could see something in this horse that I couldn't see because she had knowledge.
Yep.
See? That wasn't a belief.
Love that.
I worked as a baseball coach. I could look at this guy. I could look at some. I know exactly what he's doing wrong in his batting stance. I correct him. Okay, don't do it this way. Do it this way, right? Then he starts hitting the ball because I know it. It's not a belief. Okay, that's what experts are about. They're supposed to know, and this takes belief out of it. Gee, I think he's a nice guy. That's not a good reason. Okay. Where is he on this scale? On this scale, on this scale, on this scale, on this scale. So, again, would I like Bill Clinton to run some political office? Yes, he knows what he's doing. But do I want him going out with my sister? Definitely not. He doesn't know in that area. So this would change the world dramatically. People would be much more certain about things, and it would save them tremendous problems where they wouldn't get into bad marriages, they wouldn't get into bad relationships, they wouldn't get with business partners who cheat them. Like Billy Joel had his brother-in-law managing his business. Do you know about this? It was in the news. His brother-in-law stole $1 million from him. Okay? If Billy Joel had this book, he could have analyzed his brother and said, oh, I'm going to be nice to him, but I'm not letting him run my business. Now, he might have some other friend, and he could say, oh, this guy's high here, high here, high. I go through this all the time with people. It's not hard to do, okay? I see this guy, he's at certain levels, okay, good. There's no risk here. And the other people, I'm done, out, goodbye. I was once in a club, and the godfather of that local county in the mafia came into the club with his entourage. Scariest guy I ever saw. You could see this guy had a lot of people murdered, just looking at him. I didn't talk to him. I just stayed away. It turned out he was a relative of somebody I knew in the club. Okay? Well, the mafia used to run all the clubs in New York. I don't know if you know that. All the clubs in New York were mafia run. So he decided to go out and get a drink with his friends. So I didn't go. Normally, I'm a very affable, friendly, oh, hello, nice to meet you. Tell me about yourself. I didn't even talk to the guy. I could see, even before I had Septemics, that this was a scary dude. So how do we get people into elective office who turn out to be pathological liars, professional criminals? How does that happen? We don't understand them.
Yeah. Jim, I'd like to close out my interviews with the following question. Who did you have to stop being, and who did you need to become to manifest your current success?
Well, those are two different questions. Who I needed to become is a saint. I have no vices. I do not commit any of the 7 deadly sins. I follow the 10 commandments. I never lose my temper. And I never do anything I shouldn't do. Period. I was in a doctor's office some years ago, and I'm on a very strict diet. It's not a problem for me. So, I told him what I eat. And then after he left, the nurse said to me, do you have cheat days? I said, no. He says, how do you do that? I said, well, I know what's good for my body, and that's what I eat. So that's who I had to become. as far as who I was a flawed person like everybody else. But you have to realize that I have over 40 years of daily meditation. It didn't just happen. It was a lot of work. And I have to tell you that up until very recently, that meditation was not fun, not easy, not pleasant. It was going into the subconscious and facing the worst demons and getting rid of them. So now it's like a beautiful thing. It's like consorting with angels, So the meditation's still going on, but it's at a much higher level because I'm a different person. But I think I answered your question.
Yeah, I love it. So Jim, tell the Seven Hatters what you're up to, how they can get in touch, where could they get your book?
Well, I want to invite your viewers to my website, which is Septemics.com, Septemics, where you can see what many readers have said about it, what many journalists have written about it. You can read the reviews, you can read parts of the book itself, and there's even a 15-minute long introduction to Septemics that you can listen to as a new person that explains it in 15 minutes. And if you do all that, you're probably going to want to buy the book because, as one of the reviewers said, this is a real eye-opener. People look at this and they say, oh, I never thought about that before. 7 levels of literacy. I thought it was just literate and illiterate. No, there are 7 levels. And this explains a lot about people. So all of the scales explain a lot about people.
I'll put your website and all the information in the show notes. We'll promote you. I have to say I'm intrigued, I'm fascinated, I'm honored to speak with someone of your, not just intellect, but just desire to help humanity succeed. It comes out. Jim, thank you so much for gracing us on the Seven Hats. I can't wait to dive deeper into your work and introduce it to as many people as possible. Thank you for joining us.
You're welcome. It was a pleasure.
Yes. I hope you enjoyed my conversation with Jim. Let's end today with a show segment that I refer to as, what can we hang our head on? And here is my takeaway. Today, I want to touch on something that's been coming up a lot lately. The idea of clarity in a world filled with noise. Think about it. We're constantly bombarded with opinions, headlines, and advice from social media influencers and gurus, all fighting for our attention. And yet, as Jim pointed out, real growth starts when we strip away all that noise and focus on understanding ourselves and the people around us. That's not always easy, right? But it is necessary. Take relationships, for example. Whether it's a business partner, a spouse, or even a stranger, we tend to react based on assumptions or quick judgments instead of taking the time to really understand someone's motivations or challenges. Jim's framework is a reminder of how much we can gain by pausing, reflecting, and asking better questions, not just about others, but about ourselves. And here's a thought. What if we applied this idea of clarity to how we make decisions ourselves? In business, in politics, in life? It's easy to get swept up into chaos. But the truth is, clarity and understanding can cut through the mess every single time. It's not about being perfect. It's about being thoughtful. So my challenge to you this week is pick one area of your life. Maybe it's a relationship, a goal, a tough decision, and take a moment to really dive into it. Ask yourself, am I seeing this clearly? What assumptions might I be making? And what could I do to move forward with more confidence? I want to thank Jim once again for joining me so that we can all benefit from his wisdom. And until next time, if you found this episode helpful, please hit that subscribe button and tell other entrepreneurs out there what value you receive from it so that we can attract even more high-quality people into our Seven Hats community. So, for now, I will bid you farewell and success on your journey. And until next time, my name is Yuval Selik, and I tip my hat to you.